Hi, everybody. Well, my name is Langston Hughes II. And first of all, I want to take this chance to invite you all out on January 12th to the APAP Showcase at the Regent Parlor, Hilton Hotel on the second floor. I go on at 5 p.m. Uh, and hopefully, in this video, I can kind of convince you guys to come and check out what's going on. So, again, my name is Langston Hughes II. A lot of people ask this question, and it makes a lot of sense, but just so you guys know, right up front, I'm not related to the poet Langston Hughes II. Rather, I was named after my father, who was named after the poet. Um, all that being said, from Washington, D.C., well, right outside of Washington, D.C., in Prince George's County, Maryland. And I'm very grateful to have been born around that area because, I mean, as we all know, D.C. has such a rich history in jazz. There's such a rich history and culture. There's so many musicians ranging from Duke Ellington to Billy Taylor and so many other people that came out of that city and made such an impact, not only in jazz but the world, in the landscape of music and humanity. I think that we're in to this day. Um, but also just being a saxophone player in DC, it was such a great place because it was such an awesome community there, and so many people who I think looked out for me at such an early age, even when I wasn't really that serious and I was just like this small kid, although I'm still kind of this small kid. um, all that to say, it was such a great city and such a great landscape of people and of culture and of so many really cool opportunities. That I had to take part of when I was back in DC. I had so many mentors, people from that you might recognize, like Alan Johnson or Bruce Williams, Sonny Sumter, and Herman Burnley, and so many people who really looked out for me and really allowed me to see the power of community, of music, but more so of community. It was a scene that was, I think, small enough that everyone knew each other, but it was also big enough so that folks didn't get too comfortable. Folks still had to shed and practice and make sure they can compete. Otherwise, they wouldn't work. But um, again, it was small, so it was like everyone knew each other and everyone kind of looked out for each other. And I was very lucky that a lot of those people and so many others looked out for me, even when I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Um, all that being said, I grew up in DC. I didn't go to Duke Ellington High School. That's where a lot of so many other people have went to. So many other fantastic musicians. Although I had a chance to grow up and play with a lot of those musicians from like he kept Niquelle or Lionel Johnson or all these other people who went to Duke Ellington around the same time that I went to high school. But I didn't go to Duke Ellington because I actually didn't go to school for music when I was in high school. I went to a tech high school in Prince George's County, Maryland, which again is right outside of DC. It was about 20 minutes from kind of like Capitol Hill. Um, but I went there because at the time I wasn't too interested in music. Um, well, I don't want like the way that went. I was always interested in music, but at that time I didn't see the value in having a career in music. I'll say I wanted to do something that was a path that was a little, this is arguably, but a path that was arguably a little easier to kind of chart. Um, so I went to this tech high school with the plan to go to college for engineering or something like that. But fast forward, I went to Howard University in DC still. And about 2 months in, I quickly realized that studying engineering was not the path for me. I was miserable, and not because I couldn't hang, because I was always good at math and things like that. I had that part kind of together, and that was honestly the thing that prompted me to go to school for that. But I realized I was miserable because people had a fire in what they were doing in those classrooms that I didn't have. And I realized that I didn't have that fire for engineering or whatever, but I had that fire for something else. And at the time, I always knew in the back of my mind that I would probably end up doing music. I think at the time I thought it was a backup plan, whatever that means. Uh, but a few months in, I went to my teacher at Howard University, somebody now who I honestly look to as like a hero. He was not only a teacher, he was a mentor. He was like, I mean, now he's like my second grandfather or something. But his name was Charlie Young III, who was this fantastic saxophone player that a lot of people don't really know. He's kind of like a DC legend almost. Pretty much every saxophone player in DC know exactly who he is because they either studied with them or one of their teachers studied with them. Um, because he had that much of an impact. He was teaching at Howard University for so long. I don't want to state exactly when, but I think sometime in the late '80s, and he's been there for well over 30 years now. But he has such an impact on so many other people. But he had such an impact on me. He taught me the value and of not only music but specifically jazz, and he taught me the role that it played in forming the kind of society that we're in now. Um, he gave me clarity, I think, in the sound that I was looking for. Um, he always would tell me, he was one of those old school kind of nonsense guys. Um, and he was always very honest, and he'll tell me when something wasn't happening. Um, he'll tell me when I needed to go and practice. But he was also very honest, and he was humble, and he was okay to tell you when you did something right. And he often told me uh, that I had something very special in my playing and in the way I interpreted, I think, music. Um, he told me he couldn't always put it into words, but I would play something, and then he would just kind of look at me and like kind of like do like a little kind of gesture, and in his own way, in a special way, he would just kind of be like, man, like there's something in there, and it was that always kind of kept me going, at least in the initial days. But yeah, I went to Howard for a few years, and uh, I just I grew up in DC, but I think at that time I really realized the impact that city had, just the way that we hear music. I was talking to Captain Quelly, who's a great vocalist that some of you all may know, the other day, and we was reminiscing on this kind of DC vibe, especially when folks from DC come to New York, how the way we hear things are very different, and it's rooted in not only the culture of DC, but I think the culture of Black music. What I mean by that is, I grew up in the church. I'm a Christian, and I grew up listening to how powerful the music can be. We would often sit and hear. You might hear somebody's grandmother, who technically might not be the best singer. She probably wasn't trained in music. She probably didn't go to a music school. Um, but as soon as she opened her mouth um, to sing, she touched people. You know, and I think it was that, like growing up in that kind of environment, seeing how one note can truly touch people in that way, can make people literally cry when they're not sad, can make people, I mean, literally run up and down aisles. There were so many people who would go to these churches not for the sermon, but they would go to hear the music. And I think seeing that and being raised by that, and at the time I didn't see it as anything special. I just saw it as what was. Um, but then I realized once I got here to New York after I graduated Howard, I ended up switching my major to music, graduated Howard with a jazz studies degree, and decided that I wanted to come to New York. Um, because I wanted to be in this environment, and I wanted to be, where things, was happening. So I applied to a bunch of schools, and I ended up deciding on going to the Juilliard School, which is in Manhattan. Very grateful, to be surrounded by such amazing people. But I realized that being from DC and being surrounded by that my whole life gave me a very special thing, and it allowed me to hear music in a very particular way. I was talking to Cap, and she was talking about how people would always say that she's saying kind of quiet back home, but here she's like the opposite of that. And I think us as instrumentalists, as a saxophone player especially, what we do um, is we're like an extension of the human voice, like of our voice. I mean, I personally, I probably can't sing well enough that you guys want to hear it, but I think that when I play, what that does is like my representation of that voice, and the voice that I hear is the voice that I grew up off with so many influences, but of those influences being not only tradition and these saxophone players that I looked up to my whole life, folks like Cannonball Adderley and Johnny Hodges, and of course Bird and Kenny Garrett and all these folks, the whole canon of people, but also like the classical music that I grew up studying, especially when I got to Howard, studying that canon, but also the canon of our upbringing, right? Like the canon of the church, and the person's grandmother, who sung Amazing Grace, who who made people literally fall on the floor because of the conviction and of the power and of the spirit behind what she sang. And I think when I came to New York, uh, I bought that with me, right? Like we can't choose what we hear. But that's what I heard, and I'm grateful for it. And I think what that did was give me a very unique way of playing and of hearing things. And I'm very grateful for that. But all that being said, I moved to New York just last year, actually, to study a master's degree at the Juilliard School, where I study under great saxophonist Bruce Williams and so many other people, Mark Carey, who's also from DC. Um, this whole plethora of very great musicians who come from different things, but we all appreciate the canon and the culture and the history of what we do in jazz music. Um, but I was very lucky once I got to New York a few months in. I was able to go on the road with a band that I looked up to, ever since I really started taking jazz seriously, which Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. And we did a couple tours a few months in, and then I joined Ulysses Owens Jr.'s Generation Y band, and started playing with a lot of people. And I was very lucky that I started doing all that pretty early. Um, and I'm still kind of early here in New York, and thankfully being able to work and play with people. And I think it's because of the approach and the way I hear the saxophone. To be completely honest, I used to be kind of jealous of the people who grew up in the jazz schools and who did the jazz camps and all those things. And I used to be be a little bit jealous because they had all this technical stuff. Um, until I realized that you can always gain the technical things. I mean, we study that every day. I studied it at Howard. I study it now. But what you can't gain is the way you hear music. And I'm very grateful again for that way. So I think what maybe we'll do next is um, look into, I guess, play a video that they have geared up of uh, a video that I recorded a few years back in DC at the Millennium Stage at the Kennedy Center. And this is entitled Harlem Nocturne. And it's a song that was really made popular by the Duke Ellington um, Orchestra, but it's a beautiful song. Uh, and I think it's a cool representation of how you can play a classic song and still show yourself through that. So hope you guys enjoy the. Awesome. So again, that was Harlem Nocturne. And what that video was, I think, was a kind of small representation of what you guys can hear on January. I'm sorry, yeah, January 12th. But I think also what you're going to hear is a great band, uh, a 4 to 5 piece group of upright bass, acoustic piano, saxophone, drums, and maybe even auxiliary keyboard. I haven't ran that through the folks yet, but hopefully we can get that as well. But we're going to be playing, music that hopefully captures the human experience in some way. Music that captures how complex people are, that showcases the whispers and shouts and cries and yells that sometimes we feel inside. And it's going to be, some slow things, some things that hopefully connect with people, some fast things and things that, show the cry in our lives and all those things. So if you want to hear more of that, again, that's January 12th. And I think we go on at 5 p.m. So it's 5 p.m. on January 12th at the Hilton in Midtown, New York City, on the second floor in the Regent Parlor. So I'm going to say it one more time. That's Sunday, January 12th at 5 p.m. In the Regent Parlor on the second floor of the Hilton in Midtown, New York City. So hopefully I can see you here. If you want to say a holler or talk to me, I would love that and get to meet you. But otherwise, I will see you at some point. So take care.